Black Teen News, and today I'm going to do a react video with this Washington Post video that they had on their website, like the front page. So apparently this is the important thing that they want to show that is so prevalent in America and important for us today. So I saw other people talking about it. I avoided this when I saw Ben Shapiro talk about it in his podcast. I skipped over it because I thought it would be good to do a react, and I started watching it and I started getting these feelings, and I'm like, you guys deserve to know what it's like when I see this raw. So here we go. We're going to watch this video about racism and whiteness in America from the Washington Post.
Racism, racialization, white body supremacy is not episodic, it's structural. Remember that there were thousands of George Floyd before the one that you saw.
Okay, first and foremost, and granted, this is a man who's older, so he has seen some stuff, no doubt. But I just want to say, in case anyone is under the impression that with George Floyd, anything like that happens normally, if that were the case, and the data is not there, by the way, but if that were the case, George Floyd wouldn't be George Floyd. And I mean, they would pick better martyrs if this was something that they could afford to be selective about. There's a reason why you keep seeing people who are kind of criminals or engage in some kind of activity when they have these run-ins with the police that end in deadly force. Police are not just randomly hunting down black men and killing them, and that was the narrative that we were sold a lot last year, that people should just be afraid for their lives. No, if they could afford to not have a statue of a man that robbed a pregnant woman and died high out of his mind, then I don't think, maybe they're just bad and they're crazy at this stuff, but that's the martyr they chose. And no doubt this elderly gentleman has seen some things in his time, because he's from a era that would have far more racism than what we have today, but people don't want to acknowledge that we've made a lot of strides. Or they'll say it, but they obviously trying to make America more racist than it even was in the past, even reintroducing segregation and other stuff. But I just want to speak to that myth that if you think that this sort of stuff just happens all the time, just look at some real data to get some perspective.
Your bodily response to this horror, right, is not the same thing as you dealing with the structural aspects of this.
So you felt bad and it wasn't enough. Okay, granted. Okay, let's keep going.
George Floyd's death became a deeply personal and racial tragedy for many Americans. For the first time, white people were becoming aware of their whiteness.
You're just now becoming aware of your whiteness. Okay. If white people Thanksgiving didn't tip you off. That's a bit of a racial joke, and I'm not going to apologize for it. It was a funny trend on Twitter. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up, I guess. I don't think that's happened in a few years, but man, I was dying one year from all the jokes. And in case when anyone gets super offended, of course I know there's some white people who can cook, but it was just funny. Anyway, go on.
And the systemic ways that white supremacy affects all of us.
White people in particular get aroused, get upset, say this is unjust, this isn't right, this shouldn't happen. There's an awakening that happens. And so part of their racial identity development is seeing that awakening. What they do with it is really the next piece of it.
In this episode, we're tackling white racial identity and why understanding your whiteness is integral to becoming self-aware as a white person.
Understanding your whiteness, because you can't be a white person for real or go through life properly as a white person until you properly identify with your whiteness. Okay? I do want to say I've seen some things that are identified as whiteness, and the African American History Museum put something out last year. And they identified traits of whiteness as keeping schedules, being polite, believing intent matters, that hard work pays off, believing in Christianity is the norm, nuclear families. I'm not kidding, by the way. There it is on the screen. I'm going to overlay it. So I don't know what all they're going to say or if they'll even go into what is whiteness or traits of whiteness. But it seems like they usually name things that are pretty good. It's like, are you winning, son? Let's keep going.
I'm Nicole Ellis, and this is The New Normal.
And you know what else is like really striking about this though? Okay, so Black people out of all the minority groups see being Black as part of their identity more than anyone else. And then it's like Hispanics, and then I think it's Asians, and then it's white people at the bottom. So I guess the question is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? How definitely with the route that they're going is a bad thing, but why do they want white people to identify with whiteness so badly, especially since they think that it's a bad thing? And why is it that they want everyone to see people along these racial lines and see that as being part of their identity so bad? It doesn't make any sense. And especially since, like, if you're like an immigrant coming over from Nigeria or somewhere, you don't have the same sort of like racial identity as like a Black American because of the same sort of like structures and history, and the outlook isn't quite the same. White people have such a diverse mix up from like, you could be Italian, you could be Irish, or, you know, whatever. So it's like, why is it important that they all get defined and lumped in together as what's defined as whiteness or what's defined as Blackness and so on? Like, why isn't like culturally things it matter? Why is that not important? Or like, if you're growing up a certain area, you may be Black or you may be white, but there's culturally things that bind you together. Like, why isn't heritage or culture or I don't know, national identity, why aren't these things more important to people than skin color? I mean, I know the reason why, because they want to push cultural Marxism. I mean, that's the reason. That's what all this like critical race theory, which is really critical theory, which is like Marxist ideology, which is not just, it's just not legal stuff. The founders of the ideology said it's about activism and stuff now. That's what really this boils down to. So I'm just like asking questions I guess I know the answers to, and I want you guys to respond too, but I guess I should go on or now we'll finish this.
I am
Dear God, we're only
originally
a minute
from
in.
a smaller town in Oklahoma. Whiteness was the default, and
Because you're from Oklahoma. A lot of white people there.
whiteness was the comfort.
Part of the structure of racism and the way that it's maintained is to keep us from recognizing that racism is a part of our daily lives. And so it's a long
I know I keep stopping, but racism is not a part of all of our daily lives. And if it's part of your daily life, then man, you do have some reflection to do. But and I think that's sad since you're like a therapist, geez, or psychologist or whatever. But no, racism is it's pretty much, I guess, part of my daily routine now. But that's because I'm a Black conservative and I'm vocal and I put stuff online. So people from the left really do their best to try to convince me that America is racist by I don't know, volunteering as tribute, I guess. But I don't feel that way. Like, I don't go about my day like I'm Black. Yeah, like that hasn't been my life. Like, I don't focus on that every day. And I don't think most people do either, but I do recognize that you're trying to make everyone feel that way. Obviously with videos such as this.
Longer term process of looking at your understanding of yourself in the world, both historically, but also contextually, the family you live in, the community you live in, and what role whiteness plays in that.
The more you kind of dive into that, the more I'm really realizing how deeply rooted racism is into like my everyday thought process, no matter how much you work.
What is wrong with her? Racism is part of your everyday process. Wow.
At that, there's still even almost more work to be done.
A living, embodied, anti-racist culture does not exist among white people. White people got to start getting together, specifically around race.
See now there's this whole thing where like just not being a racist isn't a thing. You have to actively be an anti-racist and fight against racism. And the only way to be anti-racist is to see racism everywhere and combat it, even like where it may not exist. And by the way, this is kind of a side thing, but like it kills me that like Democrats are like, oh, Republicans are the racist party, even though like they're the ones with the racist history and everything like that. And don't bring up the party myth bullcrap, but they're the ones who are like confessing their white guilt, their white privilege, and their racism all last year. It's like, and they might say, no, you guys are racist too because you're white too. It's like, no, you guys confessed that you're racist, so why don't you just own that? Because we're not like admitting that. So you guys own it. So you guys are the racists. You already said it. Boom, you're the racist party.
White accountability groups are really helpful in terms of having a place to process.
This is sad.
A group of people whose responsibility it is to call me on things. Or
this is so sad.
Unpacking wrong things that we've been taught in history class. I realized
like what, the party switch myth?
I needed to go back and unpack and reorganize everything that I had learned because it was completely through a white lens.
This girl's admitting that she went through life and now she got to be indoctrinated.
Most of us in doing this work have experienced this, where there's a period of deep shame for being white and for acknowledging the harm that our ancestors have caused. And
this is what I really hate about this garbage. It's like, I don't know, privileged, entitled, self-important, self-absorbed do you have to be like, oh, I apologize for what my ancestors like. And I understand, like, you read history and you're like, oh, there's a bit of shame there if you find like, oh, you're connected to something. Like Ben Affleck, they did a background in his family history, and he like found out he like people who was like in the Confederacy or owned slaves or something like that, and he was ashamed, so he had them like edited out of the program, but they kept in like, you know, something heroic that his ancestors did, and that ended up coming out, and that they edited for his sake, and that show ended up being like ruined because of it. And it's like, it's the past. Like, I understand like a little bit, but like being like, oh, we need to apologize for what our ancestors like. Do you really think people should judge each other based on what their long since dead ancestors have done? Because I think that is just as evil as judging someone off of their skin color. You are responsible for your own individual actions, and you acting like you're, I don't know, you apologizing and like you have that sort of power. How self-aggrandizing are you? It's just crazy that you could be so arrogant and self-absorbed to do this, and you think you're being humble. Just stop.
And that's a very legitimate piece of this work. And we can't ask people of color to hold our hands through the shame piece. That needs to happen with other white people.
You don't need to be ashamed. That's sad.
For 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? You end up with actually a community that is aligned with each other.
In theory, that sounds like a good idea, but I guess I'm curious to hear, like, what are some of the pitfalls or risks that you run if that's the only step you take?
The biggest answer is white people don't really understand racism.
Oh, I'm sure they're learning. I'm sure they're learning so much about racism right now in today's time and age and stuff. Like, I'm sure they're learning. I'm sure it's deliberate, right? We're deliberately making people more racist right now. That's like their goal, right? Like, you're doing it with a smile on your face, lady, but I mean, that's the goal, probably. I think, like, because it's obvious that you want people to be racist, and you're just building a bunch of resentment. Like, not all white people are gonna bow down and be like, yeah, I'm a bad person when they haven't done anything. But you're trying to infantilize and enrage black people, and you're just making people more racist. Gosh.
So if I'm relying on other white people to teach me about racism, that can only go so far.
I'm sure black people will teach you, and other minorities will teach you about racism. I'm sure they will and are.
best understand racism by talking to people who are directly impacted by racism from different perspectives. So in addition to having white accountability groups and white accountability buddies, it's also really important to have sustained and meaningful relationships with people of color.
Why would I want to sustain a meaningful relationship with someone who believes that they are like inherently superior to me? Like, I mean, like when you talk about whiteness and these traits that you have and how and I'm oppressed, like why would I want to maintain some kind of relationship with a person like that? I wouldn't. Maybe that is also the point too, because people want to reintroduce segregation, all this other stuff. Like I don't want to be friends with, like, I can pray for you from afar, but you need to sort that garbage out. Because I never needed anyone's pity. Like, I grew up in Pontiac, which is a very urban area. I had friends who were white, black, Hispanic, Asian, so on. And then I ended up moving out in Holly, and I was like a drop of diversity in their ocean of whiteness, okay? And I forged a lot of great relationships. And a lot of those kids, were in similar financial circumstances, but some were better off. Because we actually moved out there because we lost our house. And it was like a financial tragedy that led us out there. But it ended up being like God works in mysterious ways. It was a major blessing. I had a lot of great relationships. I did very well for myself. I graduated number 9 of my class. And I never needed people's pity. I just needed an opportunity. And I took it and I ran with it. And it really killed me last year when people kept apologizing for all this kind of garbage and stuff, and for their whiteness and being white and blah, blah, blah. Because it's like, were you people racist the whole entire time I knew you? Or are you just saying stuff now for clout? Because either one is extraordinarily trashy.
Have the ability to like inherently name things as upholding white supremacy or as being racist. My whiteness is going to show up at different points in my life and at different points in different relationships.
Because you white, girl.
But is it fair or healthy to be seeking out relationships with people just to have a diverse network? Because I feel like for people of color,
this is healthy.
You're kind of constantly trying to gauge whether or not it's worth it to be vulnerable or share how someone hurt you when your white colleagues or co-workers or friends mess up.
White people get hurt too in life, and you know what? A lot of this like diversity training and critical race theory and anti-racism and all this other stuff like tells people like listen to minorities, just believe them, affirm them, or whatever. You can't trust everybody, and because some of the stuff that they say is stupid. I'm not gonna get into examples of where people just have a skewed perception that I know like it's anecdotal, but it's true. But just take my word for it. You can't trust everybody's like outlook and stuff. You have to like ask questions and really get to like, does that make sense? Because a lot of people will go left and just assume like racism rather than, I don't know, maybe you're an annoying person. Maybe you're a bad person. Maybe they had a headache and they weren't glaring at you because you're black. Maybe they just like have a migraine or it's seasonal and they feel like, I don't know, their sinus is inflamed or something. Like, but people will assume the dumbest things because they're so darn sensitive, and we're just inflaming this idiocy.
There's a different cost for my friends of color to be in relationship with me. So I think
the cost is I'm annoyed.
One of the things that's really important is being a friend on an ongoing basis for lots of different things.
You're not a friend if you just think I'm some kind of pet. Like, it's like Omni-Man sort of vibes. Like, the black people, they're really more like a pet,
Not just like thinking about racism as a part of our friendship when there's something horrible that happens. Those relationships are, number one, for me to be there for them as them for me. It's a relationship, and so it should be reciprocal, but also so that I have a broader understanding of the world.
Everything I thought about how I existed in my white body in the world was very wrong. And I needed this new
Says who?
New lens to see the world through. So I think that's been a big piece of my own work.
We're going to continue to cover topics like this
because you're a racist organization pushing Marxist agenda bullcrap.
Follow the Lily on Instagram.
I think it's so freaking hilarious. It is hilarious that the comments for this are just turned off. It's funny. It's really funny. So yeah, that was it. That was the Washington Post video on race that they had like at the top of their website, and they want people to know how, whiteness is affected in America, and that they need accountability and they need to apologize, and they want desperately everyone to have this big white identity, but there's so many people from so many different cultures that have so many different outlooks on life. Like, whiteness isn't the thread that will tie everyone together from all these different ethnicities and so on, from all these different countries and backgrounds and heritages. There's such a big difference. Such a big difference. I mean, when the Irish guy came over to America, they treated them like garbage. We have a friend, like, his last name is Palmer. That wasn't his, family's name when they came over here. They had to change it because how people treated Italians. So, I mean, there's such a big range of people, and you just want to just reduce them all to mayo. I don't know. You're racist. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed my frustration, my comments. I'm sorry if this became too long, especially commenting on a video that's like 5 minutes. But hopefully you weren't too tortured watching that, and I could entertain you while I informed you of the madness in this world. Please visit blacktnews.com. Check out the content that I have on the site. Follow me on other platforms, and make sure that you check out merchandise that I have there. And also, please, if you want to support, you can donate at blacktnews.com/donate, or you can do so via PayPal or Cash App. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time.